Elena had always imagined that pregnancy would bring her closer to Adrian, that the two of them would sit together choosing baby names and laughing about how their lives were about to change. Instead, the mansion felt colder with every passing week. The marble floors echoed with her footsteps because Adrian was either locked in his office or out attending meetings she was never invited to. Even when he was physically present, he felt miles away, his eyes glued to his phone, his responses clipped and impatient. She would place his hand on her belly when the baby kicked, hoping for a softening in his expression, but he always pulled away too quickly, muttering that he had work. One night, as she stood by the window watching snowflakes fall, she realized she couldn't remember the last time he had asked if she was feeling all right. His temper had grown sharper, tiny things set him off, from her misplacing a remote to her taking too long to walk down the stairs. She often lay in bed awake, the baby moving gently inside her, wondering what happened to the man she married. The housekeepers avoided eye contact whenever Adrian's voice boomed through the halls, as if they too sensed the tension simmering beneath the luxurious surface. Elena found herself flinching at sudden noises, her body instinctively reacting to the storm she lived with daily. She knew something bad was coming. She didn't know when, or how, but she felt it in her bones every time Adrian slammed a door or dismissed her feelings. The mansion that once symbolized success now felt like a gilded cage, and the man she loved had become a stranger whose presence made her heart race not with affection, but fear. Adrian Cole built his empire on control over markets, employees, public image, and most importantly, the narrative surrounding his name. To him, reputation wasn't just important, it was sacred. His office walls were covered with awards, headlines praising his leadership, and photos with wealthy partners. He didn't see Elena's pregnancy as a blessing but as a threat, an unpredictable variable he couldn't dominate. Whenever she asked him to accompany her to appointments, he snapped that he had no time for pointless checkups, insisting she exaggerate her symptoms for attention. He criticized her swollen ankles, her slower walk, even the way she rested her hands on her belly. With stress mounting at the company due to declining investors, Adrian became even harsher, venting his frustrations on her. He claimed she was making him look weak, that her absence from events made people question their marriage, and that her emotions were ruining his focus. His employees whispered about his temper behind closed doors, but none dared confront him. Adrian, meanwhile, convinced himself that his cruelty was justified, that pressure excused everything. He refused to see how Elena's face dimmed whenever he spoke to her, or how she avoided asking him for anything. His mistress, Victoria, fed his ego, praising his ambition, reinforcing his belief that Elena was a burden. In Adrian's mind, the world revolved around his success, and anyone who didn't support that, including his pregnant wife, was in the way. But beneath his arrogance was a ticking bomb, a blindness to the consequences waiting to strike. His obsession with image had already begun chipping away at the foundation of his life, but Adrian was too consumed with himself to realize that his downfall had already started. Elena woke to the sound of a loud emergency broadcast crackling through the television. Every news channel warned of an incoming ice storm, the worst in a decade. Roads were expected to freeze within hours, visibility would drop dangerously, and authorities urged everyone to stay indoors unless absolutely necessary. Elena placed a hand on her stomach as a tight cramp seized her. It wasn't like the usual discomfort she'd grown used to, this pain wrapped around her like a belt being pulled too tight. Worried, she walked carefully to Adrian's office, where he stood adjusting his suit in the mirror. She told him about the cramps, her voice trembling slightly, but he didn't even turn to look at her. "It's false labor," he said sharply, waving her off as if she were a child interrupting him. "Stop panicking." She tried again, explaining that the storm was worsening and she didn't feel normal, but Adrian's irritation only grew. He reminded her that he had an important investor dinner, one he claimed could make or break his company. His presence, he insisted, was essential. Elena stood there, clutching her belly as another wave of pain hit, but Adrian brushed past her, more focused on his tie than his wife's distress. The storm outside rattled the windows, a warning she felt deep inside her tightening body, but Adrian was unmoved. To him, her pain was an inconvenience, and the storm was nothing more than background noise. As evening approached, the winds howled louder, and the temperature dropped sharply. Elena's cramps had grown more frequent, and fear twisted inside her. She found Adrian near the entrance, slipping on his expensive coat, preparing to step into the deadly storm. She reached for his arm, begging him to stay home, her voice cracking under the weight of pain and fear. Instead of concern, Adrian reacted with annoyance. He accused her of being dramatic, saying she did this every time he had something important to attend. When another contraction tightened her abdomen, she gripped the wall for support, but Adrian rolled his eyes, insisting she was being clingy and manipulative. His harsh words hit harder than the storm battering the house. Elena tried one last time, reminding him of the weather alerts, pleading that something felt wrong with her pregnancy. Adrian snapped. He raised his voice, shouting that he would not let her ruin his night, that he was tired of her emotional games. The argument spiraled quickly, each word from him colder than the winter wind swirling outside. Elena's eyes filled with tears, not from the pain in her body but from the realization of how little he cared. Without another word, Adrian yanked the door open. The icy wind blasted into the hallway, and then he was gone, slamming the door behind him so hard it echoed through the mansion. Elena stood there trembling, holding her stomach, watching the world outside turn white as the storm consumed the night. In her heart, she knew something irreversible had just happened. Elena paced the living room slowly, gripping the back of the couch as another contraction tore through her body. The storm outside had grown violent, the wind screamed against the windows, and snow fell so heavily that the world beyond the glass looked white and shapeless. She dialed Adrian again, once, twice, 5 times. Each call went straight to voicemail. The sinking realization hit her, he had turned off his phone. A sharp, burning pain shot through her abdomen, stronger than any she'd felt before. She doubled over, breathing through clenched teeth, tears slipping down her cheeks. This wasn't false labor. This wasn't a scare. This was happening. Alone and trembling, she tried calling her neighbors, but no one answered. The roads were too dangerous, everyone was already sheltering from the storm. She braced herself against the stair railing as she made her way slowly toward the garage. Every step felt heavier, every breath more difficult. Her mind raced. What if the baby came before she reached the hospital? What if she passed out in the car? But the alternative, staying in the cold mansion alone while her labor intensified, felt even more terrifying. With shaking hands, she pulled on her coat, though she could barely lift her arms between contractions. The wind nearly knocked her back as she stepped into the garage. She climbed into the car, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding her to life. "Please," she whispered to herself, her voice breaking, "just let me make it there." Then, through fear and pain, she turned the key and began her desperate, lonely journey into the storm. The moment Elena pulled out of the driveway, the blizzard swallowed her car whole. Snowflakes hammered against the windshield so thickly that the headlights reflected back at her, blinding her more than illuminating the road. She leaned forward, squinting, but the world remained a swirling white nightmare. A sudden contraction stabbed through her, making her gasp and accidentally press the brakes. The car skidded violently, fishtailing across the icy road. Her heart lurched into her throat as she struggled to regain control, gripping the wheel with both trembling hands. Desperate, she called 911, praying they could help. The operator answered, but her hope collapsed when she heard the words, "All ambulances were delayed or stuck due to road closures." They told her to stay calm and drive safely, instructions that felt impossible in her state. Sweat mixed with cold tears on her face as another contraction nearly made her black out. She screamed, biting her lip to stay focused. Her baby was coming faster than expected, and the storm showed no mercy. Only the faint lights of the distant city gave her something to aim toward. She whispered to her unborn child, promising they would survive this, promising she wouldn't stop fighting. Every few seconds, pain ripped through her body, but she refused to pull over. She kept going, praying the hospital wasn't too far, praying she wouldn't collapse before reaching help. Elena's car slid into the hospital parking lot just as another contraction tore through her, stronger than any before. The snow was coming down in thick, fast sheets, making everything blur together. She squinted through the frost-covered windshield and saw chaos, stretchers, nurses running, patients being rushed inside. The storm had created a flood of emergencies, and the hospital entrances were jammed with people seeking safety. Elena honked weakly, hoping someone would notice her, but no one turned. She opened the car door, and the wind slammed into her, nearly knocking her off balance. She stepped onto the icy ground, one hand gripping her belly, the other clutching the car for support. A sharp contraction buckled her knees, and before she could stop herself, she collapsed onto the freezing pavement. "Help, please," her voice was barely a whisper, swallowed by the storm. She tried again, forcing the words out with whatever strength she had left. "Somebody, help me!" Her scream echoed across the lot, but it was hard to tell if anyone heard her over the storm and sirens. Snowflakes settled quickly on her hair, her coat, her trembling hands. Her clothes dampened instantly as the icy ground stole her body heat. She could feel herself shaking uncontrollably, her breath shallow, the cold sinking deep into her bones. Her vision blurred, darkening around the edges. She pressed a hand to her belly, terrified for the baby, terrified she might lose consciousness before anyone found her. "Please," she whispered again, the sound fading as her body weakened. Just as everything around her dimmed, distant voices began shouting in her direction, but she was too cold, too exhausted to lift her head. Adrian, meanwhile, walked confidently into the private dining hall of the elite restaurant, the storm outside barely an afterthought. Soft jazz played, crystal glasses sparkled, and wealthy investors filled the room. At his side was Victoria, dressed in a sleek red gown, clinging to his arm like she belonged there. Adrian didn't bother hiding her. In fact, he seemed to enjoy the attention. When investors asked why his very pregnant wife wasn't present, he laughed it off, claiming Elena was safe at home, resting comfortably. The lies slipped from his mouth easily, rehearsed from countless similar excuses. Victoria giggled beside him, trailing her fingers along his sleeve, whispering flattering comments about his power and charm. The investors pretended to smile, but some exchanged uneasy glances. As Adrian bragged about upcoming deals, Victoria leaned in close, her lips brushing his ear, while someone across the table discreetly lifted their phone and hit record. Within minutes, the video was uploaded, a short clip of Adrian wrapping an arm around Victoria, whispering something inappropriate, the two of them laughing intimately in the candlelit room. It spread like wildfire. Notifications buzzed on the phones of the very investors dining with him. One by one, they glanced down, the same video flashing across their screens, CEO Adrian Cole spotted with mistress during wife's final trimester. Whispers erupted. Chairs shifted. Conversations stalled. A few investors excused themselves, pretending they needed to take calls. Others stared at Adrian with thinly disguised disgust. Adrian noticed the shift in energy too late. Victoria's smile faltered as she saw people filming. The restaurant atmosphere tightened, heavy with judgment. The storm outside was nothing compared to the scandal brewing inside, a storm Adrian didn't yet realize would destroy everything he valued. A janitor making his routine rounds stepped outside to clear snow from the walkway when he heard something faint beneath the howling wind, a weak, broken cry that didn't belong to the storm. He paused, straining to listen. There it was again, barely audible but unmistakably human. He followed the sound and spotted a figure lying in the snow near a parked car. His heart lurched when he realized it was a pregnant woman, trembling violently, half buried under fresh snowfall. "Hey! I need help out here," he shouted toward the entrance as he rushed to her side. Elena's lips were blue, her breath shallow and fast. She clutched her stomach, barely able to lift her head. The janitor brushed snow off her shoulders and tried to shield her with his jacket. Within seconds, two nurses burst through the sliding doors, blankets in hand. They knelt beside Elena, wrapping her in thick hospital covers, trying to stop her body from shaking. "You're going to be okay," one nurse whispered, though her own voice trembled with urgency. Elena tried to speak but another contraction ripped through her, stealing her breath. "She's in active labor," the other nurse said. "We need to move fast." When they lifted her legs slightly to assess, their expressions changed, panic flickering across their faces. The baby's crowning. Elena's eyes widened in terror. Her body felt too cold to move, too weak to push, but nature didn't wait. The storm raged around them, freezing wind whipping their faces as the nurses shouted for more help. Elena clung to consciousness, her thoughts frantic. Don't let my baby die out here. Please. Please. The storm showed no mercy. Snow fell like sharp needles, stinging Elena's skin as she lay on the icy pavement. Nurses surrounded her, shouting directions over the wind. Stay with us, Elena. Breathe, one yelled, gripping her hand tightly. Another nurse positioned herself at Elena's legs, trying to create a barrier against the freezing cold with her own body. Each contraction tore through Elena with unbearable force. Her vision blurred, but she pushed through the pain, her teeth chattering violently. We need that baby now, a nurse cried. The baby's heartbeat, monitored by a portable Doppler one nurse had managed to bring, was slowing, each beat weaker than the last. Panic tightened Elena's chest. She felt the icy ground beneath her back, the burning cold numbing her skin. She wanted to scream but her voice felt trapped under the weight of exhaustion. Push, Elena. You have to push. She gathered every ounce of fading strength, her breath fogging in the frozen air. Her fingers clawed at the snow as she pushed with everything she had left. The storm roared like a monster around them, the nurses working desperately, their hands trembling from the cold. Elena's body convulsed with another push, her scream ripping through the night. Then, movement. The baby's head, then shoulders. One last push, fueled purely by a mother's fear and love. The baby slipped into the nurse's arms. Silence followed. Terrifying, unnatural silence. Come on, baby, come on, the nurse whispered, rubbing the tiny body. Elena felt her soul split open. Please, she gasped. Then, finally, a faint, weak wail broke through the storm. Elena sobbed, her body collapsing back into the snow. I thought we would die out here, she whispered, tears mixing with snow as relief and heartbreak washed over her all at once. A passerby in the parking lot, having witnessed the harrowing scene, couldn't believe what was happening. He fumbled with his phone, hands shaking from the cold, and captured the entire moment, Elena lying in the snow, her face pale but alive, nurses desperately working to keep her and the newborn warm. The video, raw and unfiltered, was uploaded within minutes. Social media erupted. Comments flooded in, people sharing, tagging, and voicing outrage. The hashtag Justice for Elena began trending within an hour, drawing attention worldwide. Viewers were horrified that a pregnant woman had been forced to give birth in such peril, abandoned by her husband in the middle of a blizzard. Then came the viral clip of Adrian at the investor dinner with Victoria, smirking as if nothing mattered while the storm raged outside and his wife suffered. People's anger intensified. Memes, articles, and news reports dissected every detail of his negligence. Twitter exploded with fury, Instagram and TikTok were awash with commentary. Influencers and journalists amplified the story, calling Adrian heartless, cruel, and unfit to lead. International audiences joined the conversation, demanding accountability. Public outrage became relentless. His carefully crafted image as a composed, successful CEO shattered in hours, replaced by widespread disdain. Boards and investors began watching closely, realizing that the man they trusted with their fortunes was a man whose neglect had endangered his own family. Social media would not let him hide. Every like, share, and comment spread the story further, cementing Elena's ordeal in the public consciousness and setting the stage for Adrian's unraveling. Adrian's phone finally buzzed, hundreds of missed calls, texts, and notifications flooding in simultaneously. He stared in disbelief at the screen. News alerts labeled him heartless CEO abandons pregnant wife and scandal, pregnant woman gives birth in snow. His chest tightened. Board members were calling, demanding explanations. Investors who had once applauded his decisions were now questioning his judgment, his priorities, and his morality. Panic surged through him. Without thinking, he threw on a coat and raced out of the restaurant, stepping onto the icy sidewalks. Snow and ice made every step treacherous, and in his rush, he slipped and fell hard. The fall was almost symbolic, a literal representation of his crumbling empire. He scrambled to his feet, his expensive shoes slipping against the ice as his mind raced. He imagined Elena in danger and his reputation collapsing simultaneously. Cars honked as he darted through the storm, unaware of pedestrians, oblivious to the cold cutting through him. Each step brought a new pang of fear as he realized that his life, his carefully constructed public persona, and the empire he built could vanish in moments. The once untouchable CEO, whose word was law, was now frantic, powerless, and desperate, chasing a storm that reflected the chaos he had created both outside and inside his home. Every notification on his phone felt like a hammer striking him, warning him that nothing would ever be the same. Adrian burst through the hospital doors, snow melting off his coat, his face pale and frantic. He expected chaos but not this. A line of security guards barred his path. "Sir, you cannot enter without authorization," one of them said firmly. Adrian tried to push past them, shouting, demanding to see Elena, but they held their ground. His voice rose, cracking with panic and fury. He scanned the maternity wing, desperate to catch a glimpse of her, but nurses and staff were blocking any direct access. Finally, a senior doctor stepped forward, calm but resolute. "Mr. Cole, your wife refuses to see you right now," she said. Adrian's heart sank, disbelief flashing across his face. "Refuses? Why?" The doctor didn't answer immediately. Instead, she delivered the words like a hammer. "Elena almost died tonight because you abandoned her during labor. She gave birth in the parking lot in sub-zero conditions while you chose to attend a social event. This is the reality of what happened." The weight of her words hit him like a physical blow. For the first time, Adrian felt the gravity of his cruelty. The panic in his chest mingled with guilt, shame, and a hollow fear he had never experienced before. He had always thought of himself as untouchable, the master of his empire, but now he realized he was powerless against the consequences of his own negligence. Security maintained their hold, and Elena, wrapped in a warm blanket, held her newborn close, glaring at him with a mix of sorrow and defiance. Adrian could only stand there, frozen, as the life he had ignored stared back at him with a strength he had long underestimated. The next days were a relentless avalanche of consequences for Adrian. His company's board convened an emergency meeting and, with unanimous agreement, fired him immediately. Investors, enraged by the public scandal and the video evidence of his neglect, filed lawsuits claiming negligence and mismanagement. Media outlets ran stories exposing not only the parking lot birth but also the affair with Victoria, further tarnishing his image. Social media continued to attack him mercilessly, hashtags condemning his actions trended worldwide. Victoria, sensing the implosion of Adrian's life, disappeared, cutting off all contact and leaving him utterly alone. Child Protective Services launched an investigation to ensure the baby's safety, questioning his suitability as a parent given his reckless behavior. Every source of power and influence he had cultivated, wealth, prestige, access to networks, respect, crumbled rapidly around him. His name, once synonymous with success and authority, became a symbol of betrayal and cruelty. Even minor decisions were scrutinized publicly. Sponsors withdrew their support, partners distanced themselves, and former allies treated him with disdain. Adrian's life, which he had built meticulously over decades, collapsed in a matter of days. He had lost everything: his fortune, his control, his family, and even the respect of the public he once charmed effortlessly. The world he had thought untouchable had turned on him, and there was nothing he could do to regain it. Elena spent the next few days in the hospital, slowly regaining strength after the traumatic birth. Each morning, she woke to the gentle voices of nurses checking on her and the soft cooing of her newborn baby. The janitor who had first found her visited quietly, bringing warm blankets and small gestures of kindness, reminding her that compassion still existed in a world that had felt so cold. She clung to these moments, letting the care and support fill the emptiness left by Adrian's neglect. Every day, she could feel herself healing, not just physically but emotionally, as the shock of the ordeal slowly transformed into a quiet, resolute strength. Her baby's tiny hands curling around her fingers became a symbol of survival, proof that she and her child had made it through what seemed impossible. Legal proceedings followed swiftly. Elena filed for divorce, presenting clear evidence of Adrian's abandonment and neglect. The court, seeing the gravity of the situation, granted her full custody of the child and awarded her a substantial alimony package to ensure she and her baby could live without fear of financial instability. Elena's lawyers worked efficiently, and within weeks, the divorce was finalized, severing all ties to the man who had caused so much pain. She packed up the remnants of her former life, leaving behind the mansion that had felt like a gilded cage. She moved into a smaller, more serene home, one that radiated warmth and safety rather than intimidation and cold opulence. Standing by the window one crisp morning, cradling her newborn against her chest, Elena felt the weight of the past lift slightly. Sunlight streamed through the glass, warming her skin, and she allowed herself a deep, steady breath. The wind outside carried the scent of pine and snow, and she felt at peace. For the first time in years, she experienced a profound sense of freedom, a life unshackled from fear, cruelty, and betrayal. Holding her child close, she promised herself that this was only the beginning. Every challenge, every heartbreak, and every painful lesson had led her here, to a life defined not by her past but by the strength and love she now embraced. Elena smiled through her tears, knowing that this was her true beginning.